We're back. This is Disbar, the Florida Bar. My guest this afternoon is Eliot Bernstein, and we are at the point in this long saga, and but it's necessary to build the case. We need to show you that we're not dealing with, people who don't understand what's going on. We're dealing in this case with a very intelligent individual who has created an invention that's worth multi-billions of dollars, trillions of dollars, and who has been, damaged and defeated in the process by the machinery that's put in place to do just that. And now he's come full circle. He's gone through, the process of trying to recover what has been systematically plotted to be taken from him. And he gets to the point where he goes into the court to have his day in court. The courtroom is dark, and he learns that the counsel that he has hired and that have letters of understanding where they're representing him, they withdraw from his representation. He's now left without an attorney. The judge in the matter that allows this to happen, Judge Labarga, who is now a Supreme Court judge in Florida, he says, you don't like what I did, take it up with the JQC and take it up with the Florida Bar with regard to the attorneys. So now, do you do that?
I did, and just to comment on what you just said, the machinery that is not designed to do what it did. It's designed to protect me.
Yes.
And it's the one that's victimizing me. The actual machinery that's supposed to protect an inventor is actually the one stealing from him.
Right.
So all of the protections an inventor has are violated by those entrusted to protecting them. Okay,
right.
Yes. And then at that point, with Labarga's recommendation off to the Florida Bar.
Right.
And at the Florida Bar, Proskauer, again, representing themselves with Proskauer partner Matthew Triggs, who fails to follow the rules of the Florida Bar, which says that if you were an officer of the Florida Bar for a period of 1 year, you're blacklisted from representing any cases in the Florida Bar. Remember, Matthew Triggs is also in a civil case with me.
Right.
The Proskauer fraudulent billing lawsuit.
What is Matthew Triggs? Hold on a second.
Yeah.
What is Matthew Triggs' relationship? He's the prosecuting attorney for the Florida Bar?
He was a officer of their committees.
He's a member of the Board of Governors?
You'll have to look it up. I have his exact position. But it was an officer position with the bar.
Okay, let me go back for a second. You file a complaint against whom?
Proskauer Rose, Christopher Wheeler, Bill Dick in Virginia. Okay, and then
he's a Virginia attorney, is that right?
But the first one is Florida.
Okay, so you file a complaint against Proskauer Rose. Let's just focus on them, and you allege in your complaint against Proskauer Rose that they've done what?
Stole the patents.
That they stole the patents.
They violated conflict laws. They violated every.
You provide proof to the Florida Bar, and you sign that under the oath, under penalty of perjury.
Thousands of pages signed under the penalty of perjury.
Okay, so you submit that to the Florida Bar as a complaint against these attorneys. And what did you hope to accomplish with that?
Finding out, I also filed with the JQC, and my attempt was to get these lawyers prosecuted for what they had done in the courtrooms and what they had done to me at the Florida Bar, and then go back into a civil court with criminal complaints.
In other words, you were hoping that the Florida Bar would prove that these attorneys would take your evidence and would hold the proper evidentiary hearings and the proper grievance hearings to determine that what you presented to them was accurate and truthful, and that these attorneys, in fact, violated the Florida Bar rules and committed crimes, and therefore whatever was being done in the courts would have to be stayed because of the fraud or the wrongdoings of these attorneys. That was your hope. Okay, and going to the JQC was you were hoping that the JQC would say that this judge had violated his judicial canons, and as a result of that, whatever was done by the judge should be voided ab initio.
Correct.
Okay, and so this is your hope, that you're going to them to straighten out this problem of these, what you consider, and anybody would consider listening to this, egregious acts on the part of a judge, egregious acts on the part of attorneys against you. And so you file a lengthy complaint with the Florida Bar against Proskauer Rose, among others, And as a result of and what happens after your complaint is filed?
Well, the Florida Bar lets Proskauer attorneys represent Proskauer. And Matthew Triggs, the guy who's representing the civil case
right.
for Proskauer, represents the Florida Bar complaint.
Okay.
Now, that's a conflict in itself that precludes him under the rules of the Florida Bar from doing that.
Right, but
but there are no rules.
Yeah, okay.
And they further allow him to violate the canon that precludes him from handling any complaints after sitting on one of these committees of the Florida Bar for a period of 1 year.
Okay.
So he violated that.
Okay.
That's the one I told you about where later they try to write me saying under this new law, well, not even new law, under this law, but what he did was okay, but it wasn't a law. It hadn't been ratified. It was draft language that they threw back at me, trying to defeat it. And again, they don't ask Matthew Triggs to put forth a response. They write his response for him. So actually, the state Supreme Court Bar Agency, which is the bar is an aegis of the Supreme Court, it's directly under, it is a Supreme Court entity,
right,
is doing the defense for these guys. Meaning, instead of saying to Matthew Triggs, are you conflicted, did you violate, they write me a letter, the bar, on the official letterhead of the Supreme Court, saying, no, he didn't violate it. He shoulda, coulda, woulda, but he didn't. And so, it was the craziest thing in the world.
So they say we don't find any probable cause. And
it's dismissed on review.
It's what?
Dismissed on review, meaning they didn't investigate it.
Yeah.
They reviewed it and dismissed it,
right,
which was the first response. Now,
did they ever ask you to testify?
No.
Did they ever?
They don't give you any rights.
Yeah, and when they dismissed it, then what did you do? You went for another shot?
Well, no. When they dismissed it, it was right about that time. Literally out of the sky fell news that Matthew Triggs was violating, and that we had filed after the Florida ones, New York complaints, where again Proskauer Rose partner, former president of the New York State Bar, head of the ABA Ethics Division, Stephen C. Crane of Proskauer Rose, represents Kenneth Rubenstein and Proskauer in my complaints in New York.
You can't get away from these guys.
Wait, Crane is also an officer, a major officer at the First Department where the complaints are filed.
Right.
He's totally precluded from handling them. Of course, they don't tell you any of this.
Right. So let me go back to the Florida Bar because that's the subject of this show, and I want to get this point across because we're going to come to the end, and I want to end this segment with the outcome from the Florida Bar and what we think about that going forward. Yeah. What generally happens is you file a complaint with the Florida Bar, then the Florida Bar lets the attorney know that the complaint is filed against them. The attorneys file a response, and then the Florida Bar makes a decision based on that. And what happened in this case is the Florida Bar dismissed it under the review of the complaint.
And the responses submitted by the attorneys were submitted by attorneys who were violating Florida Bar rules.
Okay, so what did you do then?
I complained about the Florida Bar people who were involved.
Did you have an attorney with you? Did you have an attorney that did this, or you did it on your own?
I did it on my own.
Okay, so your rights as a citizen in Florida, you know that an attorney has done wrong, and you know that these are Florida attorneys. You know that they've done something wrong. You have the evidence against them to prove that they've done something wrong. You take that evidence, you send it to the Florida Bar because you want the Florida Bar to investigate what you're telling them as the investigative resource of the citizens of Florida with regard to attorney complaints. You go to them with this information. They send the information to the attorney. Attorney responds, and as a result of their review of your information, which is given to them under oath, under penalty of perjury, they decide that there's nothing there that they need to prosecute. And then you discover that the person that was involved with protecting the other side, he shouldn't have been there because he's violating Florida Bar rules. And now you go back to the Florida Bar again and complain against him. Is that right?
Correct. And they write a letter saying, using law that isn't law yet, hasn't been ratified or approved by the Supreme Court for the bar rules, and try to dismiss that he should have sought the rule they wrote. The language they said that he could get approval to represent in conflict if he checked with the commission.
Right. So
and that wasn't really a rule.
Yeah, they manufactured something before it was anything to prevent you from having your right to correct what was wrong that this guy did, that Matthew Trigg did wrong in protecting Proskauer Rose, and they won't even give you that. They manufacture something to prevent that. So, and
the Triggs complaint, they didn't formally docket or anything because it involved now all of the Florida bar people who were involved in allowing it after they knew and that's
and that's the issue of the corruption, and that's one of the things that I want to ask you as a final statement. Would you state unequivocally that you have been denied honest services by the Florida bar and that you have suffered from obstruction of justice by the Florida bar and by the individuals who are in the Florida bar, the officials in the Florida bar? Would you say that that's correct?
100%, absolutely correct.
We are going to pursue a course of action. We're going to try to force the impaneled grand jury here in the state of Florida that's been impaneled by Governor Christ to investigate the corruption in the judiciary.
Well, remember that Labarga is on that commission, and Chris appointed Labarga to the Supreme Court.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to push their hand to try to get what's necessary to. We're either going to prove that they're full of baloney with this whole thing with the grand jury, or they're not, and we're going to try to carry that through in that system, and that has nothing to do with what you're doing elsewhere. It's just what we need to do here in Florida to correct this problem, to try and correct the problem. This is a monumental problem in Florida that the citizens of Florida have to wake up to, because not everybody has this kind of a case. Not everybody has this kind of a size of a case. But people are damaged daily in other ways, either through guardianships, divorces, any dealings that they have in the courts with lawyers who are a problem, and they can't get them resolved if they're in the clique, if they're in the big old boys club. Thank you very much, Eliot. I really appreciate the time that you've spent with me here on Disbar, the Florida Bar. Your story is an amazing story, and we will continue to be in touch with you and stay tuned in to that case, and hopefully we'll be able to get something done here in Florida.
Well, thank you very much for your heroic effort.
Thank you, Eliot, and we will talk to you again soon. This is Disbar, the Florida Bar. I'm your host, Les Winston. This closes another chapter of the victims of the Florida bar's corruption. We hope you understand how devastating this can be to any citizen in Florida. Your rights are being denied you, and this needs to change. We'll be with you again, same time, same station tomorrow, right here on The Biz, the fastest growing station in South Florida.
My job is to make sure that you do your job. So my jurisdiction's pretty much in your face.